Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending where you're calling in. Welcome to our webinar today on unpacking the next round of stimulus for small businesses and entrepreneurs. I'm going to ask, we are going to go through some slides, and then the moderators are available to help us go through the questions. Going to ask for convenience to please post your questions in the Q&A only. After the recording, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar, and slides will be posted shortly after and emailed to you. So do not feel the need to take diligent notes. Briefly about myself, I am the founder and CEO of Multi-Funding LLC. I'm an Inc. columnist, and I advise the White House, Federal Reserve, and Treasury Department on business credit markets. I'm also an author of The Growth Dilemma. My attorneys asked me to read some disclaimers. We are not acting as agents, packages, or brokers, and will not be able to help you get a loan placed with a specific lender or prepare or assemble applications or documents for use in applications. We are in an unprecedented time in history, and the information available to us continues to change. The information provided is based upon our best judgment about what we know at this time and a decade of experience with SBA lending. However, key questions remain about how to implement these government programs. Multi-Funding LLC does not accept any liability as it relates to the timeliness or content of the information we are sharing today or may share in the future, and we are under no legal duty to update any such information or recommendations. We encourage you to check in with your attorneys, CPAs, and financial advisors for additional insights. Now that I've made my attorneys happy, we can begin. There's a cloud over this entire presentation today. As you may or may not be aware, last night, President Trump essentially announced that he does not want to sign any of this legislation and cited a number of concerns about it. I'm not going to opine about his position. Congress has voted upon this. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of good in it, and I think it needs to get done. So we're going to assume that it's moving forward, and particularly the small business elements are moving forward. That being said, a commitment to you throughout this process, as we have since the beginning of the pandemic. We won't engage in speculation. We will only share the facts. That means that there are a lot of questions you're going to ask us today that we just don't know the answers to yet, and we are awaiting guidance. But if we don't know the answer, we're going to tell you that. As soon as this webinar is done, we will post it here and on YouTube for those who missed it. And it was to repeat again, there are going to be questions you don't know, and we're going to do one webinar today, one webinar tomorrow. We'll then post it on YouTube. And then at the point where there is substantial new information out, we will come back to you with a new presentation, and we will let you know that. Today's agenda, which is to summarize the essential and most important elements about the new legislation, covers second draw PPP loans, overall PPP changes, new opportunities with the SBA program for borrowers who are in pretty decent shape or have done okay through this, and grants and EIDL loans. For the sake of time and everyone's sanity, there are a number of parts of the legislation that we're not covering today. Specific rules and opportunities for farmers and ranchers, farm credit system institutions, eligibility of news organizations to now participate, the eligibility of 501c6 and destination marketing organizations, details about grants for live events operators, and extension of participation in the 8A program. Just to be clear, these are areas we are not going to cover today. They are niche, and we want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Now let's dig into these PPP second draw loans. What are they and how will they work, and who will be eligible and for how much? To be eligible, any business concern, nonprofit organization, housing cooperative, veterans organization, tribal business concern, eligible self-employed individual, sole proprietor, independent contractor, or small agricultural cooperative can apply. You must employ no more than 300 people. This is down from 500 people for the first round. You have to have or will use the full amount of your first PPP loan in order to be eligible for a second one. And perhaps most importantly, your gross receipts during any quarter this year will have to be at least 25% less than the same quarter in 2019. And there are some provisions for other specific circumstances as well. How much can you get? To figure out how much you're eligible for, you're going to take your average payroll costs for the last 12 months, either for the 12 months from the date of your application and multiply those times 2.5, or you will take your average payroll costs for 2019 and multiply those by 2.5 for an amount not to exceed $2 million. So if your payroll costs exceed $2 million, you're capped at $2 million. In order to get there's an extra bonus for businesses in the food or hospitality businesses, which is NAICS Code 72. These businesses can get 3.5 months of help. And there are specific alternative guidance for seasonal employers, new entities, or companies with more than one physical location that we won't dig in today. What entities are not eligible? Publicly traded companies are no longer eligible. Any entity primarily engaged in political or lobbying activities is not eligible. Any other business already ineligible for SBA loans except for nonprofits and religious organizations is not eligible. And rules around entities involved with the people, companies, there are new rules for companies who have involvement with the People's Republic of China or ownership with citizens of the People's Republic of China are no longer eligible. The forgiveness amount will be calculated on the same ratio. You can use 8 or 24 weeks for the forgiveness, and the full forgiveness will require that same ratio, but there are some additional opportunities to get new forgiveness for supplier cost, worker protection expenditures, operations expenditures, or direct disaster expenditures relate to the rioting of 2020 that we will discuss. There are also new bankruptcy provisions. So if you are in bankruptcy, certain small business debtors are eligible for PPP, but the procedure to get them requires court approval. Now let's talk about the overall changes to the PPP program. It is important to know that if your first loan is already being forgiven, you're not eligible for these new benefits. So hopefully if you had your first loan forgiven, you got the full maximum amount, 100% forgiven, and then you're done. Additional expenses eligible for loan forgiveness, as we discussed, now include operations expenditures, property damage costs in the riots, supplier costs, and expenditures to do work for protect your workers. Operation expenditures might include any payment for business software or cloud computing that facilitates business operations, product or service delivery, processing of payment, tracking of payroll expenses, human resources management, sales and billing functions, and accounting or tracking of supplies, inventory, records, and expenses. Property damage costs, if your business had vandalism or looting due to the public disturbances of 2020, you can, for the amounts that were not covered by insurance, you can apply those for your forgivable loan amount. Supplier cost expenditures made to a supplier of goods that are essential to the operations of the entity are also now available for forgivable costs. And monies that you spent on worker protection expenditures to protect your employees are now also available for forgiveness. And specific renovations that you did, such as a drive-through window facility, ventilation system, physical barriers, expansion to an outdoor facility for your restaurant expenditure, these expenditures can also now be forgiven. You will pick a covered period for forgiveness from 8 to 24 weeks, depending on what you like. And new PPP loans, the extension of the opportunity to get that window for forgiveness now extends to March 31st, 2021. There's also now a simplified forgiveness application for loans under $150,000. So if you got your first PPP for under $150,000, applying for forgiveness is much easier. Let's begin. All you have to do is to submit to your lender. There will be a one-page application. It'll be a certification providing a description of the number of employees the recipient you are able to retain because of the covered loan, the estimated amount of the covered loan spent on payroll costs, and the total loan value. You'll also attest that you accurately provided the certification, you complied with the requirements of the PPP loan, and that you agree that you will retain your records for 4 years, but you don't submit any of them to the lender. This is in case you get audited. there are no changes in the PPP forgiveness application for loan amounts in excess of $150,000. New to the PPP is specific group insurance payments can now be added as payroll costs. This specifies adding group life, disability, vision, or dental insurance to eligible payroll costs. This is effective as is included in the CARES Act. Not eligible for a PPP loan or a business or organization that was not in operation on February 15th, 2020, and there are exclusion now of entities receiving shuttered venue operator grants that we will describe briefly later. This is a big benefit for many people. It is clear now that business expenses paid with forgiven PPP funds are tax deductible and considered non-taxable income. Now let's talk about the changes to the SBA program. And I want everyone to pay particular attention to these because there are opportunities for businesses that are hanging in there, so making some money or doing well, to really take advantage of these programs, either for new debt or refinancing and recapitalizing existing debt. There's an extension of the debt relief program. So if you already have an existing SBA loan, you got 6 months of paid loans completely forgiven last year. Now, this will be extended, and for those who already got the 6 months, will get an additional 3 months. But now this benefit is capped at $9,000 a month, where before it was uncapped. If you apply, this is a big deal, folks. Pay close attention. For new SBA loans and are approved and funded through September 30th, or if the government, until the program runs out of money, you get 6 months of payment relief, and this benefit is capped at $9,000 per month. So say you apply for a $350,000 SBA loan, and you're approved and get the money, the payment on that is approximately $4,200 a month, and your first 6 months of payments are completely waived. In addition, and this is another big deal, there's now clarification that prior payments under this plan and new payments, and this will apply retroactively, are not considered taxable income. So not only do you get those 6 months of payments relieved, they're also not taxable income. Another big deal, SBA Express loans, lines of credit, which were before the pandemic $350,000, will remain through September 30th as high as $1 million. You can get a line of credit through a participating SBA lender as high as $1 million, and these will be returning to $500,000 after September 31st. In additionally, another big deal and big benefit to try get an SBA loan now is that all fees and guarantee fees are waived through September 30th, 2021, saving you a couple points on the loans. These are available for 7A, 504 loans, and microloans. In addition, they have made some changes. The SBA has two primary programs, the 7A, which is for working capital, partner buyouts, acquisitions, and real estate. And there's the 504 program, which is exclusively for real estate and equipment. Through the 504 program, they have made an effort to make it much easier and cheaper to refinance loans through the 504 program. Now let's dig into the section on grants and EIDL loans. I want to be clear that this part is a little less clear in the legislation, and there hasn't been much specific writing about it yet. There's a whole program for grants for shuttered venue operators. This includes live venue operators, promoters or theatrical producers, independent motion picture theater operators, museum operators, or talent representatives that demonstrate a 25% drop in revenue. This section is about 40 pages of legislation, and because it's so niche, we're not going to dig into it, but we want to let everyone know that it's there. In addition, the EIDL loans program has been extended through December 31st, 2021. It is our understanding, although this could be open for discussion and interpretation, but it is our understanding that as of now, that program remains capped at $150,000. But if you didn't get one, or you didn't get up to the 150, you can certainly go in and try and apply for more. Yes, in addition, you can get an EIDL and a PPP as long as you don't use the same money for both programs. This is another big deal. Many people going through who got their EIDL advance of up to $10,000 were particularly frustrated that when they went for their PPP forgiveness, that amount got deducted and that turned into a loan. That has been a real repeal. Those EIDL advances up to $10,000 remain advances. And that is the one thing, if you already applied that for forgiveness, you will get credited that back and that loan amount will be closed. The targeted EIDL advances for $10,000 are extended. And if you had less employees, so you have 3 employees and you only got $3,000, you will now be able to get the balance of the up to the $10,000. But the SBA will have, instead of 3 days to issue this money, will have this money for up to 21 days. And this extended program is extended through December 31st, 2021. Expected PPP loan document requirements will be documents for your 2019, a voided check, driver's license or passport, your CARES Act report provided by your payroll provider. And now it's my pleasure to open up the floor to questions. The moderators are going to do their best to go through your questions, invite you to ask them, and please be patient with us as we try to go through them. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ami. Our first question, will you qualify for a second round of PPP if you hadn't had the first one forgiven?
That's not an issue as we understand it.
Now, how rigorous do you think the PPP necessity declaration will be? Will the bank/SBA be looking at the financial health and funding of the company to determine if the PPP is necessary?
I'm going to ask for clarify that question. I'm assuming this is tied to the second round. And if that is correct, what the banks have to do is you're going to have to provide some proof to the banks that your gross receipts for the whatever one quarter this year are down 25% from the same quarter last year. If that will be done by payroll reports, by internal prepared reporting, or by bank statements, we're not sure yet. I think there are many people probably trying to figure that out right now. So the bank doesn't have to, as long as you meet that criteria or can prove it, there should be no issue getting a second round of PPP.
What do you suggest for businesses whose bank has shown a lackluster interest in participating in the second round of PPP?
Go find a different bank.
Will the
or
new
fintech lender. And that will all become clearer over the next few weeks as to who's participating.
Will the new round of PPP have a FTE requirement, and will we have to restore to pre-COVID head count to qualify?
It doesn't seem that way.
Regarding the 25% drop that determines eligibility, is that based on invoices or actual cash received by the business?
Cash receipts.
If a company is sitting on an EIDL money, how does the necessary requirement come into play? Can a company refund the EIDL to get PPP draw too?
I don't think you have to. You cannot use that EIDL money will not get counted as gross receipts or income, but there's no reason you have to refund your EIDL in order to get a PPP too. What you do have to keep into mind is that you can't use the PPP money and the EIDL money for the same things.
A couple questions about the full amount of the PPP. So does your first loan have to be fully forgiven, and what is the use of the full amount mean for the second round of PPP?
The first loan, to my understanding, does not have to be fully forgiven yet. That's okay. It's not, the second loan is not contingent upon having the first loan forgiven first. And how much you're eligible for the second loan is 2.5 times your payroll cost, either for the last 12 months or calendar year 2019, whatever is greater for you. Or if you're a restaurant or food business, it's 3.5 times. And that's the amount that you're eligible for. Then what you can use the money for to get forgiven, there are some additional uses for that.
300 total employees or US-based employees?
The way the legislation reads is 300 total employees. Could there be some guidance around that? Probably.
Is the limit based on average monthly payroll or annual payroll?
Average monthly payroll either for the 12 months from the date of your application or calendar year 2019.
Is the gross receipts test based on calendar quarter, so January through March, or any 3 consecutive 3 months?
The way the legislation reads, it's calendar quarters.
What if we acquired a business but have a new tax ID because it was structured as an asset purchase?
I'm not sure how that will impact anything. I don't know. I'm sure that's an area that will be subject to guidance.
If you received a MSLP Main Street Lending Program loan, can you get a second round of PPP?
Should have no connection or correlation to it.
And we're just going to clarify because
if you got a Main Street loan, that was hard to do.
It looks like we have a bunch of questions about, did you say that if the first PPP loan has been forgiven, you are not eligible for the second PPP? Can you clarify?
No. You're absolutely eligible for the second PPP if you got the first one forgiven. But say you had 85% of your first one forgiven and it had a balance of 15% that turned out to a loan. What you can't do is go and amend your forgiveness application to try to get more forgiven based on the new expenses that are allowed.
If the holding company of its subsidiary company is in the USA, is publicly traded in another country, then the sub is eligible for PPP?
I'm going to assume, unless that holding company is in the People's Republic of China, and I'm going to assume that if the employees of the subsidiary are employed in the United States, that should be acceptable.
Have you heard if the same affiliated company rules will apply with the round 2?
I believe that is the case.
I have many gig economy friends. They're supposed to be applying for are they supposed to be applying for PPP or self-unemployment state support, or can they do both?
They can apply for PPP. If they can do both, I'm not sure.
Can you summarize the forgiveness provisions for the first round of PPP payments? Does the forgivable amount apply to loans which exceed that forgivable amount?
No, you cannot get more forgiven than you were lent.
Is the SBA debt relief, the up to $9,000 per month for 3 months, automatic, or does that benefit need to be applied for?
Automatic. If you don't have it, don't get it starting in February, you should check with your banker.
Does the new SBA loans that close in January of 2021 get 3 months of no payments if under the threshold?
Technically, those loans, again, we're not 100% sure what the cutoff date is, but we'll likely they'll either going to get 3 months or hopefully they'll get 6 months. We just don't know what date the 6 months kicks in yet.
Having questions about a second.
Sorry, if you're just on the cusp of getting an SBA loan, that is something you should check with your lender, because unless it's a transaction that for some reason has to close immediately and you can wait till February 1st, you might then have the opportunity of getting those 6 months of up to $9,000 paid for you.
There is questions around the EIDL, if there will be a second one, what's the taxability, and did you say the amount of EIDL will be deducted from the PPP waived amount?
So let's be clear. There's first of all 2 EIDLs. You got, as everyone might recall, at the beginning of COVID-19, there was a chance to get an EIDL quick grant of up to $10,000, which some people got frustrated because they changed it to $1,000 per employee, and that money just popped up into your banking account within a couple of days. That program has been extended, and there is an opportunity to get that increased if you say you got $3,000 or $4,000 up to $10,000. When people went to get their PPP forgiveness applications done, people started to get very frustrated because while that was initially described as a grant, suddenly that got deducted from your forgivable loan amount, whatever EIDL advance you got, and then got put into your became a loan that you had to pay off because you couldn't get it forgiven. That part has been waived and waived retroactively if you already got forgiven. That's the one piece of the EIDL. The EIDL loans, not grants up to $150,000, are a completely separate matter. Those are main loans.
How do we apply for additional amounts? Do we go back to the same SBA portal and reapply?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not open yet, but it will be shortly.
How about ownership with payroll? Will that be forgiven?
Same rules should apply to ownership for payroll up to $100,000 per individual as applied last time.
What is or what was the deadline for PPP forgiveness?
The deadline, I'm not 100% sure, but we have some time.
If you previously received an EIDL, are there any changes to the rules surrounding these loans?
Not that I'm aware of.
There's many questions about being confused about the fact the original PPP loan has to be forgiven. You are not eligible for the second round.
That I don't know where that clarity is coming from. That's not the case.
Okay.
You have to say that you use the proceeds up for eligible uses, or you have to attest to that before you get a second PPP round, but it does not have to be forgiven yet.
Are banks compelled to offer the PPP program?
I suspect banks will kick and scream, but most of them will offer it.
If a company received less than the 10K in EIDL grant, like about 3, an example, does the company have to reapply to get the balance of the 7?
There will be a process for that, correct. Now, there's some unclear rules about, it's not clear if that will only be available to specific populations such as veterans or minority-owned businesses or underprivileged communities, or open to everyone. I'm not sure about that yet.
If gross receipts are not down 25, but net profits are down 25, are there any other options?
No.
We recently filed for forgiveness of the first PPP loan. Are we eligible to apply for the second, and it will be eligible for forgiveness as well?
You're eligible to apply as long as you meet the new revenue threshold, and they'll be assuming you're eligible to apply and you take care of all the required documentation. There should be no reason not to get forgiveness.
Can a business now qualify for a second draw PPP and the employment retention tax credit?
I don't think so, but don't hold me to that. I'm not 100% sure.
There's a lot of thought about the 150K EIDL loan may be forgiven.
150K EIDL loans, there's no conversation anywhere about those being forgiven, folks. That I've seen anywhere.
When will the SBA open the program for the second round of PPP?
Well, the first wild card is what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., and is President Trump going to sign this thing? Okay, and when? Then when that happens, I mean, there already are people in the SBA who are burning midnight oil trying to figure out how to make all this happen, and there are certain thresholds of time that they have to meet it under. It is my estimation that realistically, we can count on money starting to hit the street mid to late January.
Follow up on gross receipts. Can I pick any quarter to prove that my business was doing 25% lower than previous year's quarter?
You can pick any quarter, but it has to match the same quarter as last year. So you can't compare Q3 of this year to Q2 of last year. That doesn't work. But if Q3 of this year is 25% lower than Q3 of last year, then you're fine.
For the second round of PPP, am I understanding that we can use 2020 payroll instead of 2019? We do not have the numbers of employees now that we did in 2019, and so our payroll is less.
It is my understanding that you can use whatever's more advantageous to you. You can use either 12 months from the date of your application and take that average, or you can take the average of 2019.
Can a business apply for a PPP loan if they didn't receive the first round?
You can, but you will be applying for a first round PPP loan, not for a second round at that point, which is really a technicality, but it's essentially the same thing and the same rules, but your loan amount could technically be higher.
Can you please clarify the bankruptcy conditions? We recently filed Chapter 5 under the CARES Act and had our plan confined by the court last month.
You should check with your bankruptcy attorney, who's probably figuring it out, but there should be a way that in most circumstances that the company can still get PPP money, but it has to be approved by the court.
If we applied for less than that we could have applied for, can we reapply for the remaining amount that we could have applied for?
Yeah, I believe that there's something in there that states that you can. I'm just not 100% sure how that works, but if we'll try to provide clarification on that.
There are no revenue loss for the 25% or more requirement for the new SBA loan stipulations, correct?
100%. The banks are, folks, on the new SBA loans, banks, they've also increased guarantees for banks. They've made it very exciting and very compelling for banks to do SBA loans, which is a big thing they did in the Great Recession. So if you, and maybe we'll do a separate on this later, but even if you have debt that might make sense to recapitalize or use to expand or whatever it is, it's a really, really good time to get an SBA loan.
Can PPP be used to pay back the EIDL loan?
Not as an authorized use.
Do you think that there will be enough funds in the program to prevent the mad rush issue from the first round?
I think it's really hard to tell. There's a certain amount of fatigue. I don't know exactly how many businesses, I'm not sure anyone knows exactly how many businesses are going to meet that criteria. For some businesses, a lot of businesses, there's a real sense of urgency like there was last time, but that's not all the businesses. So I think this is going to be quite chaotic, but not quite as crazy as last time.
To clarify, even if we qualify for both rounds, the second round can be awarded but not forgiven?
No, the second round can be awarded and absolutely forgiven. I'm not sure where that confusion's coming from.
If the first round PPP loan is in the process of being forgiven, will the tax deduction for those covered costs be a credit against 2021 tax owed?
That's above my pay grade. I think so, but you should check on that with your CPA.
If your payroll expenses didn't hit 60% for the first round, how does that affect the forgiveness amount? Is the whole loan unforgiven then?
I don't think it's binary, but some of it will be forgiven and the other won't. But that, again, even if your whole first load is not forgiven, that doesn't preclude you from applying for a second PPP loan if you want it.
We are a restaurant, if that matters. And can we still receive the PPP second draw?
Absolutely. And because you're a restaurant, you can actually get 3.5 months of support instead of 2.5 months.
Are bonuses to employees considered part of payroll for PPP amount calculations?
I believe they're fine as long as they fit into the same $100,000 rule as applied last time. In other words, on a prorated basis, not one individual is eligible for more than $100,000.
What about owner draws for 2019 that were not on payroll sheets? Can I include the owner draws, the owner compensation?
Same rules as were clearly stated last time, which I'm sorry I'm not 100% on top of. Will count here.
And are there new roles for independent contractors in this bill?
Same. I mean, independent contractors are counted in the same methodology as the businesses.
Can you clarify that EIDL and PPP cannot be used on the same thing, i.e. both cannot be used to pay payroll?
Now, you can use it to cover different elements of payroll, but you can't use it to cover the same payroll.
Does the hospitality category to allow the 3.5 rate include the live event industry?
That would depend on the NAICS code, and I don't know the answer to that.
Any news on the revised MSLP in this bill?
As of now, the MSLP is done and over with.
If I received an EIDL and have the first 6 months of repayments forgiven, may I return the remainder of the balance, return without any penalty?
You can return your EIDL at any time without a prepayment penalty.
Do the number of employees limits apply to full-time employees or a number of actual bodies? We have a client that has a business that includes many part-time employees.
That I believe is going to be more specifically tied, whatever the rulings were last time, there'd be no changes to them. So I assume that whatever was applicable last time will be applicable here.
Do the qualifications differ for companies without employees, but rather only partner receiving partnership incomes?
I don't think so. The question is what percentage of a company or partner has to own in order to be qualified for it as like a salary, and there's likely guidance deep in there about that you probably need to check with your CPA about.
A bunch asking your personal opinion on what will happen if Trump does not sign the bill and any concerns that this will not be passed.
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. As I said, the one word that best describes 2020 is unpredictable. I'm hopeful that this is some form of posturing or cooler voices will prevail and get it sorted out in Washington. But it's anybody's guess. We'll be keeping our community closely informed about all that. But I wish I could tell you, folks. We decided, I debated not to postpone this last night when this hit. And then I decided it was still, I thought, important to get all this out so at least everyone can start thinking about what's based on what we know today.
And to piggyback off that, we have a question about tomorrow's seminar. Is it going to be the same topic or different materials?
Tomorrow's seminar will be exactly the same, barring any new developments. And then we're going to go offline, just to be clear. This information will be available on YouTube and on our community site at realtime.inc.com. We'll be sending everyone a copy of these slides and a copy of this video so you can listen to it if you want to, or share it with friends. And then we'll be back to you when we know more. And I can't tell you if that'll be next week or 2 weeks, but when there's enough new information to report on, then we'll come back. But we're not going to be doing these every day like we did the first time.
Can you say more about the reduced criteria or obtaining a regular SBA 504 loan in 2021?
It's not reduced criteria, but they're going to make it easier and cheaper to get 504 loans, to refinance the rates. And what we are going to do is we will be putting together a presentation, and we'll bring this to everyone the week after the week of New Year's, that will really dig into how to take advantage of all the SBA and explaining what the goodies are, how to the advantages of considering refinancing your debt with SBA, who can get it, how they can get it, etc. We'll work on that over the holidays and have that available.
Can you please explain the employee retention tax credit?
I'm sorry, I don't know enough about it to speak to it fairly.
For SBA loans, are the 6 months up to $9,000 being waived? Does that include interest and principal?
Yes.
I have an active FEIN since December of 2019, but commenced operations in September of 2020, and only have had payroll since September 2020. Would I be eligible to apply for the second round of PPP based on 1 quarter of payroll?
There are specific regs about that. I don't know them without looking them up, but feel free to email us in or post that on realtime.inc.com, and we'll be happy to share it with you. We'll try to get you an answer.
Gross receipts, does that mean only cash received from customers, or does it include intercompany loan proceeds?
I almost guarantee it's cash from customers for money that you got paid.
And are there specific employee requirements for the second round of PPP, like the FTE requirements in the first round?
Since there's none of that in the bill, we're just going to assume it's that the same information holds.
A bunch of questions of how soon the applications for PPP round 2 will be accepted.
I am just going to post, we should have done this, but I want to add this website for everybody and encourage, and we'll add this in the slides that you get, but here's our community site in partnership with Inc., in collaboration with Inc., realtime.inc.com, where I have a daily blog about this. We also have a new Facebook group, and a lot of people are going back and forth and asking questions and getting answers on these important topics. So we encourage everybody also to check that out, and we'll add a slide with this URL in the presentation that we share with everybody.
Our bank says that our first PPP has to be forgiven before we can apply for an SBA 7A. Do you agree? And now with the PPP 2,
no, that should have nothing to do with it. Reach out to us about that, but there should be no correlation between the EIDL and the PPP forgiveness and getting a conventional SBA loan. That sounds like an excuse. There might be another reason you're not eligible, but that should not be a reason.
If a second round PPP would take a business over the 2 million threshold, do you think that they will be subject to an automatic audit?
Second round PPP, you cannot get more than $2 million. Now, there likely will still be some audits and different audit criteria, but the maximum of a second round PPP is $2 million.
Is revenue looking at all quarters of 2020 being under 25 or just comparing 1, 2, or 3?
Just 1, 2, 3, or 4.
What if there was a change in entity type during 2020, sole prop to S Corp?
Yeah, I think that's going to be some of the nuances and the criteria, and we know that they're going to overcome that. People are going to have to check in.
Will repayment start dates for EIDL loans be pushed given how long the pandemic has lasted?
I don't know.
Our business was down 100% for 3 months, April to June. We qualified for both the EIDL and PPP, but our business after August onwards improved by the year end with a small profit. Are we still eligible for the second round of PPP, even though our business improved after August?
As long as one quarter this year was down 25% compared to one quarter last year, you should have no issue.
If I bought an existing hotel business and closed it in March of 2020, can I apply for either an EIDL or a PPP?
I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. There might be some specific rules and regs that prohibit it, but as long as that business was in business, I don't think it's the change of ownership has any impact on that.
I have a few questions around the employee max, and it is 300 employees or below.
Correct. And I'm going to assume that whatever criteria last time for the employee count at 500 and whatever the rules were between full-time and part-time or employees overseas or whatever they will, those same rules will apply this time, but the threshold will be 300 instead of 500.
Please address the necessity test because my revenue was down by more than 25% in Q2, but I'm still profitable this year. Would I still qualify?
No impact. You should be able to get it.
With 2019, we would get more money as we had 40 employees, and now we only have 13 due to the pandemic, most part-time. Can we still get a loan based on 2019 payroll?
That's my understanding. I just want to be clear, folks, that this is brand spanking new. I want to give a real shout out to my team who's been basically hasn't slept for a couple of days trying to digest all this. And so we can report it out to you. And there are probably some answers in all this that we are giving you that we might mess up. And my promise to you is if we got something wrong, we'll tell you. And we're doing our best to sort out a very complicated legislation that has a lot of ambiguities in it. And but we're just want to share with you that I hope we're getting it all right. I think we're getting 99.9% of it right, but there's likely something that could be off.
Say a company slides into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It should still be possible to get a PPP if approved by court, correct?
Correct.
When you're talking about SBA loans to restructure debt, is that different from EIDL loans, or can the EIDL be used to restructure debt?
Totally different from EIDL loans. And again, we will put together over the holidays a very thorough presentation to explain the SBA, what it does, how it works, what the opportunities are, what lenders look for, etc. And we will announce that for the first week of January, and we'll keep that going, and that'll be great. I think that'll help answer a lot of those questions.
Do you know if the supplier costs will be included in forgivable costs under the new second round of PPP?
Yes, and if you haven't already applied for your first round, you can also retroactively add them to your costs.
So the 2.5 times payroll amount can still be based off of 2019, if I heard you correctly.
That is my understanding, correct.
Is it confirmed that the last PPP will not be taxed?
Correct.
Can number of employees be higher than 300 if the NAICS code for your industry is higher, as it was in the case of?
I don't think so. Folks, just let me know, we're going to go through a few more questions and then we're going to wrap up at the end of the hour. I want to invite everyone again. You'll be getting an email from us with this information. I want to invite everyone to join the discussion at realtime.inc.com. There are going to be a lot more questions. I'm going to ask everyone, please try not to ask us every question individually if you can. We will be launching in the next few days a private, like a consulting service, so that if you want help, educational help specific to your questions on all this, one of our advisors will be available to answer any of your specific questions from start to finish and available to you. We'll be announcing that over the next few days as well.
Thank you, Ami. Can you clarify the amount of PPP? So it's total payroll divided by 12 and then times 2.5?
That's correct. Total eligible payroll costs. So like as an employee had $300,000, only $100,000 of that is eligible.
So we have questions on the are party rentals companies consider 3.5, or is any other NAICS code other than 72 qualify for the 3.5x?
At this point in the legislation, it's only NAICS code 72. Exactly what's in there, I'm not sure.
Can you clarify if there is SBA business debt relief included in this bill, similar to the first round where the SBA paid the principal and interest?
Yeah, there is. So if you had an SBA loan, you get an additional 3 months of payment, but that's capped at $9,000 a month this time.
Do you know how paying for goods and supplies factor into the next round?
Some of those are eligible expenses for forgiveness in the next round.
So just repeating for clarity, we can choose the 2019-2020 quarterly, same quarter, gross receipts comparison to support a second PPP application, correct?
That's correct. And it might be important, again, because one thing that small businesses or entrepreneurs can do now is go in and make sure your bookkeeping is in order, your accounting is in order. You can compare accurately, compare quarters to quarter. Your QuickBooks are updated or your bookkeeping system is updated. You might want to make sure if necessary, your accounting is reconciled to your bank statements, if that's required as backup. So while the SBA and the banks are getting ready, those are things that everyone can do today.
If we were not forgiven the first round of PPP, did you say that amount is not taxable income?
I don't know if there's any specific nuances if the amount was not forgiven. So please, I'm not going to answer that.
Will we include the employer taxes in our calculation for payroll in 2019?
However, I don't think so. But however you did it last time, you'll do the same thing this time.
And which program, SBA, EIDL, PPP loan should we apply for to cover for payroll?
I think you need to look at all of them depending upon your specific situation. Okay, folks, I'm going to give a shout out to Hannah, who's been beautifully and majestically running through thousands of questions in the queue to try and get to as many of them. Thank you so much. There's Megan, who's hiding in the background, who's been up all night for the last 2 nights, digesting this thing and helping put the slides together. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to the rest of my team for your help. I want to wish everybody a very, as best as possible, happy holiday season. At Multifunding, we remain committed to doing everything we possibly can to help the small business community through all this. Try to get some rest. We will do this again tomorrow. It'll be the same presentation, maybe with a few little tweaks, and go through questions. And then we'll be back to you first week of January with a presentation specifically on how best to take advantage of the SBA, the 7A, and the 504, and take advantage of the 90% guarantees and the reduced fees and the 6 months of payments. And on that note, feel free to email out, join our community site at realtime.inc.com. And let's just hope that all the political backstabbing and nonsense in Washington gets sorted out and we can all move forward. So on that note, we want to sign off, wish everyone a very happy holiday season, Merry Christmas to those who celebrate, and look forward to getting this next round of PPP rolling. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, Ami.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.